On this episode of AV Week, taking a look at the latest in digital signage and whether or not 3D is coming down the pipeline for the segment, and what Facebook's crash means for the AV industry moving to the cloud. All that and more. Next on AV Week.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is AV Week, episode 529, recorded Friday, October 8th, 2021. AV Conspiracy.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by
Extron, industry-leading technology backed by world-class support.
This is AV Week, your weekly wrap-up of audio-visual news and information. My name is Tim Albright. I am your host. With us to discuss the news and information we have gathered this week. First and foremost, I'm going to go do closest to the farthest away because my buddy Erica Williams is here over in Kansas City that way. How are you, ma'am?
I'm pretty good. How are you doing?
I am well. Due north of me is a young man that I met a long time ago when we were both tech managers. His name is Mike Brandis. Welcome, sir.
A long time when we were both tech managers and young men. It's good to be on again, Tim. So thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. Let's go due east. Mr. Frank Paticala has joined us. He has pulled himself away from the fine folks at Panasonic. Welcome, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And a brand newbie, so please be nice to her, you three. Her name is Carmen Dominguez, and she is with Barco Due South down in Dallas Way. How are you, ma'am?
I'm fantastic. Thanks for having me on today.
Absolutely. So the first story here, technically, I could have grabbed any publication pretty much in the world. I grabbed the one from NPR, but knock yourself out. Just type in Facebook outage, and you'll find an article, all right? Bottom line here is Facebook, WhatsApp, and Instagram had a quote-unquote worldwide outage on Monday. The root cause was a faulty configuration change, and that there is quote-unquote no evidence that the user data was compromised as a result. Kind of somewhat full disclosure, I don't use Facebook a lot. I am on there. If you want to find me, that's fine. I use Instagram and WhatsApp. I did notice some outages. And the reason I bring this up is the cloud version, the cloud basis of this. During my day job at CTI, we're going down the road of looking at a couple different software solutions that are all cloud-based, meaning that they're on somebody else's server. Frank, I'm going to start with you on this. Not for nothing, but Frank is a longtime drumbeat of IT is AV and AV is IT. Okay. What happens when this happens? What happens when the cloud goes down, Frank? What happens when we've put all of our eggs in the, AV as a service basket and somebody unplugs something?
Well, the first thing you do is you find humor in it, right? It's like, because I pity the poor techs who had to deal with this. My Twitter timeline was flooded with jokes. I loved it. I'm going to share one. It's if I say about networking, the one that always comes to mind is that I could tell you a UDP joke, but you wouldn't get it. But I could tell you a BGP joke, and you'll definitely get it, right? So BGP is one of those protocols used to configure these long-distance routes, and people say that's one of the causes behind this. Somebody misplaced a routing table, entered something incorrectly, and what happened is Facebook, for a few hours, did not exist anymore. There was no Facebook.com anywhere, right? So the relevance of having backup, and no matter what you do, and this is Facebook we're talking about, millions of users every minute. So the cloud going down is a reality of it, but that doesn't take away from the fact that this is where we're going. You like it or not, cloud services are here to stay. Outages are normal. It's just that they're more glorified now. I mean, you'd have routers going down too. You'd have switches going down too. You'd have your most trusted matrix routers going down. It's a part of electronics. Sometimes they go down, but cloud, the convenience that it offers to you is unmatched, and I don't think there's any question in it. Now, can we improve our processes? Can we make ourselves more competent to go through these things? Absolutely. But, it's going to stay. I'm still on the AV's IT, this is here to stay bandwagon, never changing that.
All right. Mr. Brandis. Mike works for, actually, three of you guys work for manufacturers. Frank works for Panasonic. Mike works for QSC. QSC is certainly going down this road here. Frank makes a good point. This is where we're going, the convenience factor here. So how, as someone who works inside one of these companies that is going down this cloud road, how do you develop for that? How do you talk to customers about that? And how do you talk to customers that are kind of on two different spectrums here? You've got folks that are certainly in the camp of AV as IT, but you also have, let's just call them old curmudgeons, who will shake their fist at the cloud and say, not in my backyard. I need my physical switcher.
That's a great question. So first of all, thank God we're talking about this, because local equipment has never ever gone down in anyone's lifetime. So the cloud's unique in that aspect, right? So we're already off to a good start. The thing I would say there, and I'm speaking first of all as a guy who works for a company, not as the company. If I were to bet who's going to have a better uptime, is it going to be Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud, Azure, or is it going to be 200 physical servers in a data center somewhere in my property, in my building that's susceptible to power outages, things like that? I'm going to bet the farm on those other three companies, not mine. Now, for users, the experience is the same, right? Whether you have a physical piece of equipment in the room that goes down, maybe a power supply breaks, something like that, you have downtime. Your downtime is in the days, hours, if you can go get another power supply, things like that. When you go to the cloud, this was a huge issue. They lost the BGP routing. They didn't exist. They weren't on their CNAME records were gone. And this was resolved in 2-3 hours, 4 hours, something like that, right? This wasn't ship me another piece of hardware via the RMA cycle next day air to resolve it. So, I'm a technology guy, an adopter. I think there's a lot more stability and there's a lot more opportunity and stuff that's not hosted on-prem. Obviously, you have the need for on-prem stuff. I don't know if I want to send my laptop feed to the cloud for processing to come back to my in-room distribution, right? That's silly. When latency is involved, the cloud's not the way to go. So there's always going to be that on-prem cloud solution, especially for signal management. But for data, I can guarantee you that your uptime is going to be greater using a hosted web service with redundant data centers across the world, as opposed to the IBM server in your basement.
All right. Erica helps out the folks and works for Henderson Engineers. What happens when you're supporting and you're helping out and putting together and making sure that this presentation works, or that highfalutin meeting happens and the cloud goes down? Is it, like Mike says, sure, gear has never gone down. Yes, we're all being sarcastic here, because gear certainly will go down. So is it just because it's newer that we get freaked out, or at least guys like me get freaked out about the cloud, and it's just where we're headed, or where are we in the comfort level here of making sure that as we migrate to the cloud, everybody kind of comes along and comes along comfortably, I guess.
Well, I just want to start out by saying I don't think what happened to Facebook was an accident. Just saying, if you're into conspiracy theories, I don't think it was an accident. Just throwing that out there.
Tell me more.
Go on. Don't tell her more. Don't tell him more. No.
I'm listening.
It's just the timing.
It was Jack from Twitter. He got in there. Anyhow.
Yeah. It's just interesting timing. Just very interesting timing. Convenient timing, if you ask me.
I kind of echo that too, because that becomes the bigger news,
Dad,
right?
you have more adopters of this. Great.
You might have a point there.
Time out really quickly. The reason she's saying that, if you didn't catch that, right, the Facebook whistleblower had just been on 60 Minutes? Mm-hmm. 60 Minutes, and she was getting ready to testify before Congress. So yeah.
Distraction.
You think they were just deleting?
Can't testify about what doesn't exist.
Exactly, yeah.
And their stocks dropped right before it all went down too.
Although I will say this,
Okay.
I don't think anybody disbelieves anything people say about Facebook at this point. It's like Facebook.
True.
Yeah, they probably did it. That's just the assumption.
So that's an interesting question, and I'm glad you asked. The unique thing about my environment is not only do we now have, we're a Zoom shop completely, so we've got meetings and phone. It's all in the cloud. It's all cloud-based. In the architecture, engineering, construction world, you also have things like BIM 360 and AutoCAD and Revit starting to move things to the cloud. You've got other products that people use for, punch lists and everything. It's all in the cloud. So there's a lot going on. And I think it helps, especially in managing users' expectations, that it's already kind of been around a little bit. People have already had a little bit of a taste of what happens when something goes down, and they know what to expect. Obviously, with newer things, and especially with conference rooms, I think it just all depends. If you've got a huge presentation where you're trying to win a new client and everything breaks down, yeah, everybody's going to freak out. But if it's your weekly scheduling meeting, everybody's not going to necessarily freak out. They'll understand. Mike said a really good thing about having redundancy, and redundancy absolutely in your data centers, but also redundancy in your backup plan. You can never put all your eggs in one basket with just Zoom. We also have Teams. We also have WebEx. We have backup plans. So worst case scenario, we need to switch it, but it's likely not all of those are ever going to go down at the same time, right? So, making sure that you have redundancy across all kinds of levels is super important, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Carmen, you'll have the last word on this one. Wrap us up. As you're talking with clients, and whether that is folks that are higher education or corporate, as we kind of move to the cloud, how are you helping? How is companies like Marco and like QSC and Panasonic helping the industry get to the cloud safely? Right, but also making sure that we do so with a comfort level that we have, with our gear that we can see and touch and feel.
Sure. I think, Erica and Mike kind of hit the nail on the head earlier, kind of stole a little bit of my thunder, but I think a lot of it is going to come down to making sure that proper planning is being taken into account, that your software SaaS service is actually built to have redundancy in there, and that there's multiple areas that you can kind of segment so things don't get bogged down. But most importantly, having a plan B internally as an organization. You can't, like Erica said, put all your eggs in one basket and expect to be able to continue business as usual if there should be a time that the network goes down or the cloud service goes down. Here internally, we also have many different softwares that we use, and we use Teams on a day-to-day basis. But we also have other platforms that we use so that we can continue, conducting day-to-day business activities. So I think that's important, redundancy and having a plan B internally to make sure that communication and business continues.
Thanks so much for watching this first segment of AV Week. To check out the rest of the episode for free, click on the link below or go by the website, avnation.tv. That's avnation.tv.